Today on the Ask Brady Show, we talk about the pro tips for producing a welcome video for your church.
Well, hey there!
Welcome to the Ask Brady Show, episode number 51. We've got 4 great questions from the people of Pro Church Nation, and I'm joined as always to my left, it's your right, it's Roxanne.
It's true.
True it is, behind the camera, the editing wizard himself, Joe Nex. And the man with the cam, who's sick, Alex Mills.
Thanks. It's not really as special as it sounds, because
I work here, but I'm here.
All right, Roxanne, take us away with the first question, please.
All right, first question comes from Gabe, and he says, "Hey, Pro Churchers, I'm struggling with producing a welcome video for our church to put on social media and our website. The goal of the video is to give people a complete picture of what to expect, almost like a virtual tour that covers everything from coffee and bagels to kids check-in to worship and sermon experience. My struggle is how to present this. Lots of B-roll with narration on top of it, as simple as a silent video on the landing page of our website, a first-person guide that walks you through the church first-time visitor experience. Do we want the lead pastor looking at the cameras saying, 'Hope to see you soon'? Even though that feels super cheesy to me, I'm conflicted. Hoping you have some advice or tips or links. Much appreciated."
Well, thanks for the question, Gabe. I'm just going to speak from our experience of how we make videos, and I found that the best thing that works for us is a single person that's talking on camera with a bunch of B-roll on top of it. Now, for this particular instance, what I would do is I would do my very best to emulate through the video what it would be like for a first-time visitor to attend your church. And the reason for this is that we all find things that are unfamiliar, uncomfortable. And so what you can do with a video like this is kind of create a walkthrough for what it would be like for someone to attend your church for the very first time. Look, whenever I am going to a new place, I always scope it out as much as possible. Now, I'm a little bit crazy because I love certainty more than the average person. Now, don't get me wrong, Roxanne, we all crave certainty to a certain degree, but there are some of us that enjoy the thrill of adventure more than others. So for instance, this weekend, Mitchell and I, Mitch, the very first employee here at Pro Church Tools, Saturday night we went to a movie theater to catch 2 of the movies that were generating a lot of Oscar buzz. When we went to see these movies, they were only playing at a theater that neither of us had ever been to. It was about an hour away. I looked up for the theater, where it was, of course, parking, and how to get to the restaurant that I wanted to go to near it, and parking for that.
Yep.
And then I estimated times for each. Because when you are playing with movies and you want to get a good seat and you've got to figure out reservations for dinner and it's a new place, you need to know how everything is going to play out as best as you can before it actually happens. Similarly, in this instance, what I would do is I would start with the pastor on camera, introducing him or herself. You want to start with a human because that's going to gain more attention and more interaction than if you go straight to the B-roll. B-roll is not nearly as engaging as a human talking on camera. One caveat to make for this is that if your pastor is uncomfortable on camera, there are 2 different directions that you can take. 1, you can film him or her with a teleprompter. Or 2, you can film him or her going off the cuff. If you are going off the cuff, you could do something where you shoot with a 4K camera that will allow you to punch in and punch out so that you can cover up their mistakes when they do make a mistake. Don't worry, just start off with the last natural break that you made and we'll fix it, cut it together in post. Or you can shoot similarly to how we do the Ask Brady Show and Pro Church Daily with 2 cameras, and that way you can even more cover up the mistakes by switching between 2 different camera angles. Yep. The punching in 4K and 4 out is something that we've done for a while, especially when I'm doing really long videos, like 15 to 30 minutes. Jonas, while he's editing, will punch in when I make a mistake and then punch out, or we'll cover up the mistake with B-roll, which is another option, but it's not as good as covering it up with 2 cameras. Maybe you don't have 2 cameras. Maybe you do have a 4K camera. That's one way to do that. But start with the pastor on camera. And then, as soon as you can, transition into the B-roll. Once you have the pastor on camera, I would say within the first 3 to 5 seconds, introduce some B-roll. So you can start with the parking lot. some video of your, parking greeters, if you have any, waving and smiling with smiles on their faces, and then what it's like to walk through the doors for the first time, kind of like a POV style. Maybe you could put it on a gimbal, so it's almost as if the person is walking. They walk in, they go to the kids' check-in area, then they find their seats, and then you can just cut together, B-roll from the service. This doesn't have to be the POV angle. I would switch to B-roll of the worship happening, people raising their hands, if that's your thing at your church, people keeping their hands at their sides, people opening hymnals, people standing, people sitting, waving flags, blowing the shofar, whatever it may be, and then preaching from stage, and then what it would be like to, leave the auditorium. I would even, in the video, put it going to the Connect Center, the Welcome Center, whatever you call it, and handing in your card, almost to kind of just future proof and kind of, future, whatever the word is that I'm looking for. Get it in the mind of the visitor that, you're going to fill out the Connect card when you come, and then you'll get a gift. You'll pick up your kids from the kids ministry, jump in your car, and at home. And all the while, I would have your pastor narrating this, so you can film the entire video of him talking through it, and then at the beginning show him, then cover it up with B-roll, going back and forth to the pastor when it makes sense, and then close out with him, doing the invitation. That's how I would do it. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Nope. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to emulate what it would be like for a new visitor to attend. And basically, once they have in their mind exactly what to expect, that removes one of the barriers that a lot of people hold in their minds, keeps them from coming to church. It's unfamiliar, and thus it is scary. Remove that unfamiliarity, and now you've got one less barrier for people who don't want to attend church. And when it comes to placement for this video, obviously you can post it on social, like you said. I would also put it in a prominent location on your website. So you can put it on the I'm New page. If you don't have one of those, you can put it directly on your homepage with an I'm New section, so that everyone that lands on your website, which is where first impressions are being made, if you're being discovered online anywhere, it's going to be your website, more likely more than social media. So make sure that it's there, prominently placed, permanently, because on social, you could put it in your header or something like that. But at the end of the day, if you post it, it's going to just disappear into the ether pretty quickly. The nice thing about shooting a video like this is that you could use the B-roll as a silent video in your header on Facebook as well. So what you could do is you could cut out the part where the pastor talks and just put all the B-roll silently in the header, and then you're using it in multiple locations. And really, this is helpful in so many different creative contexts, with churches being as strapped as we are for money and time and resources and, creative volunteers, professionals that know what they're doing in this industry, really in any industry, because churches are so understaffed in general. Reuse and repurpose as much as you possibly can. So all that footage that you shot, you can reuse it in so many different contexts. Shoot it once, use it forever.
Yep. All right. Question 2 comes from Nick, and he says, "Hey guys, we have some people wanting to get email addresses out via the video announcements. I'm wondering what the best way to do this is. What do you guys find is the most effective way to get out contact information?"
Well, thanks for the question, Nick. This is something that a lot of churches don't even think about. So props to you for considering the call to action that you want to present to your church, and really how to optimize that to get as many responses as you possibly can, because that's what we're trying to accomplish with our calls to action, whether it be going to an email address, going to the Welcome Center, opening up the app, going to a website, calling somebody, talking to Pastor Carl in person, whatever it might be. We are trying to get as many people to respond to the call to action as possible. So, what is the best way to get as many call to actions as we can? Simply put, use a single call to action every single time and drill it into the mind of your congregation week after week after week after week after week after week after week. The same way that I am saying the word week over and over again, you want to drill it into your mind. The place to go to take your next step is always insert here. So once we have that as our kind of foundational principle, the foundational strategy for maximizing the number of responses that we get for any call to action, the question becomes from there, what is the best platform to make this work? There are a number of different options that we can approach. First, let's start with email addresses. I would call these manual methods of response. So I would lump into that phone numbers as well, or talking to pastors or leaders or volunteers individually. This works great in the sense that it is incredibly, quote unquote, like guerrilla style, Guerilla. It's very kind of grassroots. It's easy to do at any point. It doesn't require any technology or any setup ahead of time. Just, talk to Pastor Carl. Oh, yeah, email Pastor Carl. Carl@carl.com. That's right. He owns carl.com. The downside of this is that these manual methods don't scale exceptionally well. Right. So you still have to have someone on the other side managing everything. And this can be difficult when your church exceeds a certain number or if your church is just very active. And it's unfortunate because if someone sends in a response and they're excited and then you don't respond, I don't know, within an hour or two, it's very easy for people to feel upset, to feel left out, to feel like, man, I'm doing a favor for this church. I'm volunteering of my time, for instance, and they're not even going to get back to me for 24, 48 hours. Now, it's not your fault. If they're signing up on a Sunday, how much work has gone into that Sunday? How long have you been at church on that Sunday?
Yeah.
You shouldn't feel obligated to respond within an hour or two after you get home from church and just want to have a nap finally because you've done 6 services or you've done 1 service but you were practicing at 8 a.m., which means you had to be at the church at 6:30. You were up at 5:30. Roxanne, you were up so early.
I know.
Difficult.
I know.
And now someone's upset because you didn't respond within an hour, but perception is reality, and that's how they can perceive it very easily. So that's what's detrimental about these methods of capturing responses. What are some other options? Well, you could use an app. Of course, that requires everyone to have downloaded the app, to be using the app. And when we look at the data for app download rates, it's not super encouraging. Mm-hmm. And that's an extra barrier for them, assuming most people in your church haven't downloaded the app yet, or even if they have, for those that haven't, they got to download the app and then they have to respond. And anytime you put in an extra barrier to downloading it, to making a response, you get less responses.
Yeah.
We talk about this with Connect Card. The more fields that you have on your Connect Card, the less responses you're going to get. The data we have backs that up. Third option is you can use a Connect desk or a Welcome Center or a Connect Center or whatever you want to call it. The desk in the lobby or the area in the lobby where people can go and take their next steps. The downside to this is that that's only accessible on Sundays, or it's only accessible if people come to the church during office hours throughout the week. So if someone is ready to respond, they see a message on social media, they see something on the website, they're like, oh, I'm ready to respond. Oh, well, now I have to go to the church office. Well, that's a huge barrier, even more than downloading an app, obviously.
Yep.
And then the final one that we like to use the most is, of course, the website. If your website is functioning properly, it should be able to handle every single next step that your church can offer. It should be the next step for ministry and event signups. It should be the next step for giving. It should be the next step for getting information. It should be the next step for listening to the podcast, watching the sermon, reading the blog post, connecting with a small group, whatever it might be, learning about the kids ministry, planning a visit, submitting a prayer request, contacting the church. Your website in 2018 should be able to do all of these things. And the more platforms that you're using, the more disconnected your responses are, the more platforms you have to use to fill in the gaps. My website, it can do this, but it can't do that, so I've got to use a mobile app to fill in that. And even that is sometimes difficult, so we make sure we got to have a fallback. That's the pastor, and if he doesn't respond, or if she doesn't respond, and maybe he shouldn't respond. It's been a long day for him. It's difficult. Now someone's upset. Kathy is pissed, and Kathy's in here, and she's like, you didn't respond. Carl's like, I'm just trying to have a nap, Kathy. Go on. You can see how this can quickly get out of hand. Of course, that's a little bit sensational and hyperbolic, but the point is, you always want to have a single call to action. And what we have found works best is the website, using a platform like Nucleus, which will be opening very soon. We're very excited about that. We've been building it for so long, and it is finally ready to serve that singular purpose as your website that works for every single call to action that you could throw at it, integrated into all the platforms that you could want. And now, for instance, Nucleus integrates with MailChimp. So what you could have is someone signs up for a small group or signs up to volunteer, and you can set up an autoresponder that sends them an email right away.
Yeah.
So you could still use an email address if you wanted, but what would be a lot better is using a form within Nucleus that has an automated response ready to go. So now it's not Carl's responsibility to respond, and Kathy's not upset that she never got a response because it was worked in, looped in through the Nucleus integration to MailChimp to trigger an autoresponder that thanked Kathy for signing up. She felt validated, she felt heard and noticed, and Pastor Carl got to have his nap.
I feel good for Pastor Carl.
I feel great for Kathy and Carl. This is the power of technology when leveraged correctly, whether you use Nucleus or not. Of course, we highly recommend it. I would love you to. The point is that you want to have a single call to action.
Yeah.
The difficulty with emails is that they are difficult to remember.
Yeah.
And they don't scale. The manual method. Use something like a website. You can use it for every single thing, and you just drill that call to action into your congregation's mind again and again and again. And then within a couple of months, even if people aren't attending every single week, they know that if they want to volunteer, if they want to give, if they want to sign up for a small group, if they want to register for a ministry or an event or a conference, if they want to read a blog post, listen to a podcast, watch a message, submit a prayer request, contact the church, there's always one place to do it all. It is your website.
Yeah. I completely agree. Even when I'm at church and I hear the announcements, I just automatically assume I'll be like, oh, I don't have to remember the details now. I'll just check the website later, which is not always a good assumption to make, but I make it.
That is a great insight, Roxanne, because that is what we assume, because for the most part, that will always work.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, most church websites have difficulty and aren't exactly set up to help people succeed. No. Most church websites aren't set up for Roxanne to succeed. And she goes expecting to be able to do what she should be able to do, and then she can't. Roxanne went with good intentions. She wanted to volunteer. She wanted to give. She wanted to sign up. Now she can't. And when that barrier is there, more often than not, people will simply say, oh, okay, well, I tried. Move on.
That's exactly what I do. Or I'm like, oh, well, I'll get back to it later. And then I never do, or I'm always late.
That's what you should do. It shouldn't be your responsibility to, after you've gone to a website, after you've done the work of opening up a browser and typing in the URL, even if it is memorable for you because church, let's say, are doing the right thing and, hitting on it every single week, you land on it and you're like, I'm trying to do the right thing and you're not letting me. And this isn't just churches. The number of times I've had to pay a customs or a duty fee for importing a shipment. And then I'm like, FedEx, I'm trying to give you money. Why are you making this so difficult? We'll just call one of our representatives. I don't want to talk to anyone, FedEx. Let me do this online. Well, our system isn't built for it. You are a multinational, many millions dollar corporation. Fix this.
Truth. So FedEx, if you're listening.
Church isn't FedEx.
All right. Question 3 comes from Carter, and he says, when choosing a thumbnail for a sermon video, do you guys use a good shot from the sermon itself, or do you go to a series graphic? I've been using a snap from the sermon, but I'm not sure it's the best resource.
Thanks for the question, Carter. Let's talk about thumbnails. Thumbnails, the purpose of them is to capture someone's attention and convince them to click. If you use the same image week after week, that being the sermon artwork, regardless of how beautiful, stunning it is, people are less likely to click on it because they've seen it before. They'll likely just think it's the same video. What you want to do is capture a different photo every single time. And we, at the Ask Brady Show, understand this difficulty. And when I say we, I mean Alex. Alex has to shoot a thumbnail every single episode. This is the 51st episode of the Ask Brady Show. That means he shot 51 different photos in this room. And we film in the exact same location. Sure, we change our shirts, but aside from that, it's the exact same. And he has to come up with new and creative ways of displaying that thumbnail because he knows that regardless of how great the information may or may not be in this video, if the thumbnail isn't compelling enough, people aren't going to click and watch, and thus will never get to hear the information therein. Similarly with your sermon, it's almost identical. Your pastor is speaking from the stage each and every week. The majority of the time, him or her, it's the same person up there. You have to find new and creative ways of showing that pastor on stage. Now, likely your stage is bigger than this room. The lighting may not be as good, but if you're using a DSLR with a fast lens that can open up wide enough to capture enough light, and most cameras can nowadays, you'll be fine with that. You've probably got even more to work with than this. So be creative. Use different angles, different framing, different proximity between you and the pastor, different lenses to have different compression, wide angle, telephoto, lots of different stuff that you can work with. Definitely, though, do not use the sermon artwork, because you'll keep using it, let's say 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row. People are just going to tune out. And if you go to your YouTube channel or your Facebook videos section, it's just going to all look the same. And you want each video to look unique because each message is unique, right? Each message is completely different, even if it is in the same series. But the way you present it, if you use the artwork every time, is that you're presenting it as if it is an identical message. But it's not. The other thing to mention here is that when you use a thumbnail with a human face in it, especially when that human face fills the majority of the frame, and when it's smiling or laughing or making a funny face, which should be very easy to capture when a person is talking live on stage,
It's true.
those thumbnails disproportionately outperform other things because we as humans interact with the faces of other humans. We interact with each other. We're a social species. God said, man should not be alone.
It's true.
Woman should not be alone. Humankind should not be alone. We are wired in the DNA that God gave us. We need and crave each other. And so, people that are engaging with your videos are going to engage much more when the thumbnail is of another human, especially if they know who that human is, and it's your pastor, versus sermon artwork.
It was definitely a great point about like not using the same thing multiple times, because even when I go to my subscriptions page, I never look at like what they're titled. I'm always just like, does this look like something I've watched before?
Wow.
And then if it looks similar to something I've watched, I'm like, oh, I think I already watched that, and don't bother clicking it. So that is a great point.
With Pro Church Daily, we're doing this. So every single week, we film 6 episodes in here, and Alex and I sit in the exact spot. We have to capture custom thumbnails for each, and we shoot each of the thumbnails in the Pro Church office space. Sure, we have 3,000 square feet here, but it's still the same room. And so like we did one a week ago or so called 3 ways churches can combat the new Facebook algorithm. So we have a San Francisco 49ers helmet in here that my team so graciously pitched and bought me last year when Nucleus launched, I think.
Yeah.
And it's one of my most treasured pieces of sports memorabilia. I put the helmet on because in the title we talked about 3 ways to combat the Facebook algorithm. So I put the helmet on as if I was ready to fight, and that was the thumbnail that we used. It's me with a football helmet on, like with a crazy, scary face.
It's true. It was
People are going to click on that because it's like, what is this, right? And the content in there is great. We want as many people to discover the ways to combat the new Facebook algorithm so they can reach more people with the message of Jesus.
Yep.
The thumbnail is extremely instrumental in making that happen.
Yeah. Basically, Alex is a genius.
That is true. The man with the cam stays winning, except today because he's sick.
That's true. All right. Last question comes from Porter, and he says, what's everyone's thoughts on using memes for church social media posts? A good attempt to relate to culture, or just plain tacky and degrades your church's brand?
Thanks for the question, Porter. I do have firsthand experience with this. When I was hired on as the media director at my church, second year of Bible college, I was 19 or 20 years old. I was thrust into the role managing the church's social media. This was back in the day when Twitter and Facebook were really the only 2 options, Facebook being the big one. And I, upon reading a couple of books on social media about starting conversations and being personal, decided to post some funny content on there. Memes weren't as big then, but it was basically the same idea of what a meme is today. And frankly, the senior leadership kind of reached out to me and said, look, this is, to use Porter's verbiage, degrading to our brand, and we don't want to do it. Despite the fact that it had more reach than other stuff,
right.
Despite the fact that it had more interaction than other stuff. Now, with that being said, you don't want all of your stuff to be funny. But one of the best churches to follow on social is Life Church, one of the biggest churches, most successful churches in the world. And what their motto is for their entire church is as follows. I'm going to butcher it, but as long as we don't sin, we'll do it, basically. It's like anything short of sin. Yeah, that's it, right?
Yeah,
that makes sense. Anything short of sin. I don't want to like mix up the words and say, as long as we sin, let's do it. Anything short of sin to reach people for Jesus.
Yeah.
And they post all the time stuff that is not quote-unquote religious or quote-unquote spiritual. They'll be like, hey, it's Throwback Thursday. What's a great memory from your childhood? Or, hey, it's like, new release song Friday. What are you listening to today? Or they'll post funny memes, funny GIFs, funny images. Because it gets engagement, it gets interaction. And that's what we're trying to do on social. Yep. So as long as you're tasteful with it and you're not posting something that is like political or crosses the line, sexually or, vulgarity-wise, you're fine. Post it, gain the interaction, gain the reach. Don't let it be the only thing. But if it's like 1 out of every 10, 1 out of every 7 posts, yeah, that's totally fine. Once a week, when something really works, don't force it, but don't feel like it's degrading to your brand either. Because at the end of the day, we talked about this on Pro Church Daily in the episode called The Endless War Between Attention and Artistry. At the end of the day, attention is the most valuable commodity that your church can possess. And you have to find the line where you think it's okay to cross, and there are lines that we don't want to cross. One way to get a lot of attention? Get naked. We're not going to do that with our churches. No. That's crossing the line. But using humor and comedy tastefully, for me, that's not crossing the line.
Yeah, I agree.
You agree?
Yep.
What about getting naked?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to get naked. Sorry.
Great insights from Roxanne. Thanks for watching today's episode of Pro Church Daily. If you want your question answered, you can send in a video. We didn't have one today. We almost always do, which means we're out of video questions. Send one in, Pro Church Nation. When you do, we'll immediately put that question at the top of the queue, and you'll get answered first before everybody else. Of course, if you want your verbal question answered, your written question, you can send it into the email, same place you can send your video, hello@prochurchtools.com. Of course, you can also reach out on social media with the hashtag AskBrady on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, and you can get your question answered there. We love you, Pro Church Nation. Go seize the 167. We'll talk soon.
I don't know what's
And we got to get through this. I got other stuff to do, man. We're screwed.
It's already 3:30.
Yeah, I'm going home before.
Okay. Dang it. Looks like I'm part of a group message.
Thanks for the question, Nick. I think I hit my mic just in case. Well, thanks for the question, Nick. Don't look at me weird like that.
I'm sorry.
Yo, if you want to put B-roll in this one, I'm fine. Or sorry, what's it called?
Especially the part
Bloopers.
where he said he doesn't attend church.
Okay, not the bad stuff.